Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode on Swish City, where I'm going to be breaking down our power rankings, looking at each team ranked 30 to 1. We've already broken down an abundance of teams, so if you missed those videos, go check them out. And we're going to be doing one each day leading up to the season. We're going to be going over their additions, their subtractions, who they kept, players that I think fit in with their squad, and I think will have a great season this year, players that they think don't necessarily fit or maybe need to make a decision on, and then overall looking at the final record prediction. As you guys can tell from the title, from the thumbnail, we're going to be going over the Houston Rockets in today's episode. And I think they're a young, inexperienced team, but they're going to be exciting, going to be fun, and they're going to be in this play-in race this year. Mark my words. So let's dive in and let's get into all the news revolving around this Rockets team. First, we're going to be looking at their additions, subtractions, and departures. And for the Houston Rockets, they didn't have many transactions this offseason. It was a very, very light offseason for the team this year. They went out and brought back Aaron Holiday on a 2-year deal and went in and signed Nate Williams. They did have some fun in the draft, which we'll get into in a little bit. But also, they did go out and acquire AJ Griffin from the Hawks. But unfortunately, as we all know, if you don't, AJ Griffin has retired from the NBA and been bought out from the Rockets. Therefore, is no longer under contract and playing with this roster. So if we want to look at this team courtesy of Spot Track, we can see the top tier players that are making the most money are those free agents that went and signed last offseason in Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks, the two guys who were brought here to kind of jumpstart this rebuild, which is very, very nice. Steven Adams was acquired last off season. Some people might be confused, thinking, why is Steven Adams? How did he get there? Steven Adams was traded last season. He did not play at all last season. He was out at the start of the year. But the Grizzlies went out and moved Steven Adams, as they were already tanking, to the Rockets, where the Rockets were knowing that they needed a backup center next year and got Adams for the low. They went out and traded Victor Oladipo, who was also not under contract and is no longer in the NBA. Then when you look at this Rockets team, we all know they have a bunch of young talent and young depth. Jalen Green, one of their rookies from a couple seasons ago. Jabari Smith, one of their rookies from a couple seasons ago. Amen Thompson, one of their rookies from a couple seasons ago. And this year's draft class rookie, number 3 overall pick in the draft, Reed Shepard. They also have some other intriguing players as well that are very young. Tari Eason, Cam Whitmore, Alperen Sengun, who broke out last season, and also have made some nice additions on the bottom end as well. Going in and bringing in Marquise Noel on an Exhibit 10-day, and Thon Maker, who's looking to make an NBA comeback at that center position. All these players are very, very young, very, very intriguing. And for this Rockets team, that's what I think is exciting. When you come into this season, they might not be the most talented roster, but they have a lot of depth in a lot of places with a lot of young talent that can really step up and shine. For this Rockets team, it's truly finding who can be those true star players and who is really going to be that number one option that you're going to be playing through and finding that number one option. Once you find that option, you then build around said piece and ultimately construct this roster to make deep playoff runs. The Rockets have enough ammunition with draft picks and with um, young talent to be able to go out and make those moves smart and strategically for their future. And I love what the Rockets are doing. Unfortunately, they are a little lower just because they're a little bit young in a stacked Western Conference, but I still am very, very excited about this team. And they're one of the teams that I'm the highest on going into this season. So now that we got that all of the way, let's look at the players that I like and I think are going to be making some great moves this year, and some players that I necessarily think either don't really fit or possibly the Rockets need to make a decision on who is their number one guy. So let's get into all of this. First, let's talk about the rookie Reed Shepard. As you all know, I don't really like talking about rookies and breaking in these roster predictions if you've been going over and watching most of these videos. But Reed Shepard is one of those rookies where I have to talk about. One, he's a Kentucky player, and I am in love with every Kentucky player. I am a huge Kentucky basketball fan. They are my number one college, and I always will be supporting Reed Shepard in college was absolutely fantastic, and in my opinion, should have been in the number one overall pick. If you guys have not seen the highlight clip of him in training camp already, please go and watch it. This man is going to break next. He is an absolutely fantastic playmaker while also being a great scorer on the offensive side and just a true point guard. But ultimately, besides that, defensively, shows that hustle, shows that hard work, and never gives up fighting for those loose steals. And I think is going to be an Very, very solid rookie and possibly could win Rookie of the Year this season. I think him and Donovan Clean are my two Rookie of the Year picks at this moment, competing for that award. Like I said, I think he should have went number one overall, but unfortunately, since the Hawks had Trae Young, a very similar player in Reed Shepard, they did not want to go out there and trade Trae Young to take Reed Shepard and fully start their rebuild. They still want to believe in Trae Young. I think ultimately the Hawks should have moved the number one pick because they would have been able to still get either Reza Shar or Alexander Starr, whoever they wanted at that middle pick at 2 or 3, or even if they traded back to 4 or 5, and another team could have taken Reed. Reed is the real deal. Trust me. And next, another player that I want to talk about that I'm really, really high on is Tari Eason. Tari Eason coming out of LSU was a fantastic defender and has that length and size to be an impactful defender in the NBA. He has the build to be one of those guys like a Herbert Jones, build to be like one of those guys like a Jaden McDaniels. And he is still young enough to grow into one of those players. Unfortunately for Eason, he has dealt with an amount of injuries in his career, in his young career already, that has kind of sidelined him and has not allowed him to be able to play in as many games for the Rockets, which also has allowed for some other young players on this team to kind of grow. Like I kind of mentioned earlier on in the video, this Rockets team is just full of young talent. So basically, if a young player goes down, if someone steps up and takes that role and clearly shows up and dominates, it's going to be that player's position. And like I said, with this Rockets team, there's an abundance more players that I'd be talking about too. But Tari Eason is one of them that I've really liked in college. Translating to the NBA, he's brought some great defensive versatility, and I think if healthy, can be one of the top tier defenders in the NBA, young defenders in the NBA at that wing position, and can be fit in the rest of this league as well. So I'm really, really liking what I see out of him, and maybe it would have to be a new change of scenery out of Houston, just because there are so many wings in that group. And like I mentioned, there's an abundance of other young players that we could have breaking down and talking about that I like in today's episode. Like I said, I like Amen Thompson, their rookie from a couple seasons ago. He's 6'7", plays the point guard position, but is a very, very good defender. You got a player in Jay Sean Tate, who's been here for a couple of years, but is still a soluble wing, and I still think can look nice. Cam Whitmore played at Villanova. I saw him play with my own eyes when I went to Seton Hall, and he is a fuck it. He does not miss. I do not know how fell to pick 20. He was a top 10 pick. And I don't care about character issues, man. Cam Whitmore is a dog. Like I'm saying, this Rockets team is full of young studs, young guys that can really take over. And I think this season is truly going to be the year that we find out who that number one option is. And that kind of gets into the next part. Like I said, there is absolutely no one on this Rockets team that I dislike. Fred Van Fleet, Dylan Brooks, those guys were brought in to bring some better leadership. Those guys are here to take over. And trust me, they will translate to that bench unit. Maybe Brooks even possibly getting moved in a year or two because they have so many young pieces and young talent. They could look to move off of a contract in Brooks. But I definitely see Fred Van Fleet staying with this team and then translating into that six-man role coming off the bench with players like Reed Shepard kind of taking over, maybe even Amen Thompson kind of taking over those guard positions in the starting lineup for this Suns team, or not Rockets team in the future. I could see a player like Fred Van Fleet translating to the bench. But let's kind of get into the next part. And like I said, I like every player on this team. There's not a player I dislike. But when discussing players and discussing kind of directions that the Rockets need to go, we need to discuss these two players, in Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. And this is what I'm saying. It's not that I dislike any of these players. I love both of these players. I think that Alperen Sengun is baby Jokic. I can't wait to see how he translates this game this year at the center position. He's an underrated center. Not a lot of people knew about his name until last season, and he really, really broke out. He's absolutely fantastic, one of the best passing bigs in the league, and I really think that he is going to be a top tier center for years to come. Jalen Green, also, I've been a huge fan since high school. Obviously, went the G League Igniter route, got drafted second overall by the Rockets, and it's taken a couple years for him to get into that rhythm. But last season, we truly saw him really take over for this Rockets team and be that legitimate superstar at that guard position when he had the ball in his hands 24/7. So the ultimate question comes down to is, do you believe in Jalen Green? Are you running him with the number one? Or are you running Alperen Sengun? Or can these guys work together? Because as we've seen with the Rockets, with Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr., they both had to share the ball in their hands. It wasn't really working. With him and Sengun this year, it was working, and they were a top tier team in the Western Conference at the start, and were both looking very solid. But when both players went down with injuries, it was different. Sengun was the main leader for the Rockets at the start of the year. He was their focal point. He was who the offense was being run through. And as Sengun being the number one leader, this Rockets team was looking very good. Sengun goes down. They have a little bit of a mishap. Jalen Green comes in. Jalen Green starts balling out at the second half of the year and is looking like an MIP candidate and looking like one of the best young players in the entire league at this point. Looking like vintage MJ, throwing dunks down, hitting tough shots from three, and just completely looks like he did a 180 in a span of 3 weeks. So ultimately, like I said, I think both of these players can be number one options. I think both of these players are young talents that are going to be great, but can they work together? I don't necessarily know. With Jalen Green being on his final year of his rookie deal as well, looking for that extension. With Alperen Sengun also looking for an extension to be done as well. This could be complicating for the Rockets front office to kind of figure out who they want to kind of trust in and who they want to make their number one option. I think that this season with the Rockets, we're going to see one of these players truly emerge to be that number one guy, to be that focal point, to be the main motor of the offense. And we might see them work together. And this could be, a completely irrelevant part of the video. And these guys could simultaneously work together. They could be a top two, top three team in the Western Conference. And I wouldn't be shocked. But if they can't work together like we've seen in past, maybe around trade deadline if things aren't working out, or maybe at the end of the season if the Rockets have a disappointing postseason because they still are young, this is the offseason to make that move and truly decide who is going to be your main centerpiece for the future. Like I said, I don't dislike anybody on this Rockets team. I'm not critiquing anybody. I just think the front office needs to make that key decision soon. So now let's get into the record predictions. Like I said in previous videos, if you guys have been tuning in, the record predictions are wonky. I messed them up, but we're still doing them anyways. Look at the record prediction: 45 and 37 for the Rockets here, coming in at ninth place in this Western Conference. And to be honest, I would like to put them higher, but there are so many teams in this Western Conference that are really, really good that I think are going to be very, very competent. It's kind of tough to rank them. In my honest opinion, there's only three teams in the Western Conference that I don't see making the playoffs, and that's the Utah Jazz, San Antonio Spurs, and the Portland Trail Blazers. We could see maybe one of those teams surprising me as well, but I think those three teams are kind of solidified and locked in. Any of these 12 teams in the Western Conference, from teams that I haven't mentioned to teams that I already previously mentioned, like Lakers, Warriors, Clippers, any of those teams could just have a surprising year and just blossom in and push right themselves in there. And if the Rockets have injuries, they could fall out. With this Western Conference, it's very tough, very competitive, but I really like this young nature of this Rockets team. I also think with guys like Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Tari Eason, Cam Whitmore getting better through the years, the roster is just only going to continue to show development. And last season, we saw them take a huge jump, and I see them this year also taking another jump as well, making the play-in at least. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Where do you guys think? Where would you guys rate the Houston Rockets? Do you guys think I had them too high? Do you guys think I had them too low? What's your honest projections of the Rockets? Do you guys like my analyzations? Did you think I did right, wrong? Let me know down below in the comment section. I love reading your guys' comments. You guys have been absolutely fantastic, showing your love and support on the channel and the revitalization of Swiss City. That means the world to me. Once again, thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. Catch you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out, everyone.